I'm joined today by two more of our Trial by Combat 2022 competitors. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Sara. I'm a senior at Yale, competing on Yale mock trial, and I'm really happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Juliana. I just graduated from Duke, but I was on Duke mock trial.
Congratulations to both of you on being selected for our Trial by Combat 2022 field. I think it's every year I say this, but I feel like it's our best field yet. How do you guys feel about being selected? How did you feel when you got the call?
I was nervous also because Thomas was on WatchMock and he said that I was going to win Trial by Combat this year, but I had no idea that he said that. So he came out to me at Nats and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put any pressure on you." Like earlier that day, he'd offered me lunch, so that's what I thought he was talking about, and it wasn't at all. So then I watched the podcast and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And now I have to apply just because I think Thomas did put a little bit of heat on me. And I was like, it's gonna be really embarrassing if Thomas said I was gonna win Trial by Combat and I don't even get selected. So was a little bit nervous, but really excited to get the call.
Yeah,
really excited to compete.
You know what's so funny about it? Like Thomas said that, and in my head, you can probably see it on my face in the video. I was like, she hasn't even applied. Like everyone just assumes she's not even applied yet. So that is a very off the wall pick. But turns out he could have been right. So we'll see in a couple of weeks. Juliana, how do you feel? How did you feel when you got the call that you were officially going to be invited?
I was really excited. It was like a big week. We had just finished nationals. I was doing like different job things after graduation. A little nervous because I feel like I've big shoes to fill with Sonali having won it. Sava did really well last year, but it's very cool to be involved. So I was just really excited. Actually, a lot of things going on that week.
You guys were in the same division at nationals and both did very well, finishing with 8 wins and squarely in the top 10. How did it feel to be back competing in person, and were you guys satisfied with your finishes?
It was so good to be competing back in person. Like, I know everybody says it, but Zoom mock trial just doesn't do it justice. Like, there's something that's so electric about being able to compete in person, especially me as a senior. I was going to be really sad if I never got to compete at Nats in person because I started my sophomore year. So that was super exciting. And as I mean, we said it at Nats, but our team was super young this year. So I was so happy. Like with 5 first years on our team, I was like, you guys are going to do so much better than I did in my time at Yale mock trial, having all of the knowledge that they learned at Nats. So I was thrilled, honestly. And so were they.
Sara, how many of those final rounds were you in over the last 3 years? I know you were obviously in last year's final round, but were you in the other two?
I was not, no.
So you were on Yale B at that point, or did you compete for all 4 years?
No, I started competing in college my sophomore year. So my sophomore year was, I guess, the year that COVID like shut down the rest of the season. So then my junior year, I competed at Nats in the national final round last year. And then I competed at Nats this year.
Juliana, you guys had a really big year last year. And so I think one of the similarities between your two programs is people were wondering with kind of the talent turnover in both of your programs over the last couple of years, what was it going to be like? How did you guys feel finishing in the top 10, 8 wins at nationals, another successful season for Duke?
We were really excited. I mean, we didn't know like if we were going to be able to pull it off yet another year. This is the 3rd year Duke has done a finish like that. And it was definitely a very challenging year for us. Eric, who was our head coach the past couple of years, moved on. He wasn't coaching us. We became a lot more student run. So I think all of us were really excited, but then more than anything, relieved to have done well at Nats and kind of proven that we can still do this.
So Juliana, I judged your scrimmage against Tufts as we were talking about before we started recording earlier in the semester. And Eric had told me on the show that he was, not going to be coaching or probably taking a big step back. And then I signed on to the Zoom for the round and he was there. And I was like, what are you doing? How do you, he was like, oh, I'm just, I'm not actually coaching. I'm like, well, you're here and it's a Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. So.
No, I mean, I would love if he had been coaching the whole year, and he helped us a little bit in like the early months before his job started, but he was really mostly in and out. Like he would come and see a scrimmage and give kind of high level feedback. Like right after that scrimmage, we totally changed our prosecution theory, but no, he wasn't really here this year. The past couple of years with Eric had been great though. Like I had no idea who he was when I first joined Duke mock trial. I just thought he was another student when I tried out and he was in the room. But we all make fun of him because he has such a big like reputation. You go on Mock Trial Confessions, his name was all over the page. But he's just a great coach. He can look at material and he instantly knows what's wrong with it, what you need to fix. He's very good at adapting to each competitor's style. I love working with him.
When the Duke people were on the show, they said that Eric wore the Trial by Combat crew neck all around. Like,
yeah.
Can you confirm that?
I can confirm. Yep. And the Nationals t-shirts, he has limited wardrobe options.
And we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit here, but why don't you tell everyone who doesn't know yet, because it's not really public, who your coach for Trial by Combat is going to be?
It's going to be Eric, so I'm excited.
For someone who's not coaching Duke this year.
I really think like every single time I talk to him, he's like, this is it. This is the last time I'll ever do mock trial, but I don't know.
Yeah. Something tells me that's not going to be the case, but we'll see. So the competitors and coaches know who the second chairs and coaches are going to be for each of the advocates in our field this year. But for those watching who aren't privy to that information, why don't you guys tell us who your second chairs and coaches are going to be?
So my coach is going to be Alvin Winston. He was a captain of a number of my teams that I've been on at Yale Mock Trial. He's like one of my just best friends. And beyond that, I think he's always someone that can keep my head on straight. And in like such a short time to prepare, he's going to be the person that tells me like, focus up, Sarah. And that is probably going to be the most important thing for me throughout the weekend. And then my second chair is Christina Robertson, also one of my really, really good friends that I competed with in mock trial. This year, unfortunately, she wasn't able to compete. And when I saw that I could, I'd have a second chair, I thought it'd be really nice just to be like, Tina, please come compete with me. It'd be really great to have you there. So yeah, that's my coach and second chair.
So we know about Eric, who's going to be with you guys as second chair.
Yeah, Jacob Hervey is going to be my second chair. He was Seva's last year, competed with him all of this year too. So I'm excited.
He was a freshman last year and was subject to my really bad joke at the opening ceremony.
He said you guys introduced him as, oh, he's a freshman. So
yeah, it's really hard because Justin's jokes are usually pretty good. So I think I pressed a little hard last year at the opening ceremony, and he was the subject of one of my not so good jokes. That's a really good. Those are two really good groups.
It's memorable.
Yeah. Well, I remember it at least. I don't know if anybody else does, but that's really exciting. I'm super pumped to see how you guys do it. I'm excited to see everyone in LA. Before we talk a little bit more about combat, I want to talk a little bit more about nationals. And I've talked about this on the show a little bit with some of the people who've come on before you about the final round of Harvard versus Chicago. And I think, everyone at NCT is obviously really good. I don't think that many people were predicting that final round. If you look at the polls and just what people were kind of talking about on Confessions and elsewhere. What did you guys think when it was announced that it was going to be Harvard v. Chicago?
So that weekend we'd scrimmaged Harvard on P, and then we hit Chicago on their D in round 2. And honestly, having seen them both, right before Nats actually started and during Nats, I can't say I was surprised at all. They both were so phenomenal. I think that round with Chicago was probably one of the most just truly captivating rounds of mock trial I've ever participated in. So it was absolutely no shock to see Chicago there after having competed at them at with Nats. And then to see Harvard there, Travis, Audrey, they're Stella, they're all so talented. And I know everybody was so shocked that they went P, but after seeing their P, I was like, this is the right call. They absolutely killed it. I mean, perhaps not the final round that everybody thought it was going to be, but definitely a final round with two very, very deserving and talented teams.
You guys saw Harvard at Orcs, is that right?
Yes.
And that was you guys plus 13 minus 2. So it was a split, but it was a split a little bit in your favor. Yes. What did you think of them when you saw them at Orcs?
Also fantastic. That round, we were in this tiniest room you possibly you could be competing in. The well was probably 3 feet deep. And I remember just getting into the room and being like, if there's any team I want to be competing with right now in this terrible, hot, tiny room, it's Harvard. I feel like over the past season, especially our programs have gotten pretty close. I remember going in there being ideal outcome is we split, so we both make it out of Orcs. And then seeing the ballots at the end, I was like, I'm okay with that. That's actually kind of perfect for me. And after it was announced, after Harvard made it out of Orcs, I remember like literally running up to Travis and Stella, and they were like crying, and I was like, this is exactly what I wanted to happen. So I'm just so happy for them.
So I'm going to push back a little bit and try to ask a better question, because every time I ask that question, I get a similar answer, which is that they're fantastic. And I don't think anyone was surprised. Like looking back on this round in 5 years, I don't think anyone was going to be surprised that Harvard and Chicago were in a NCT final round, because they're two storied programs with structure and history and all that. But I do think that if the average AMTA competitor who has their finger on the pulse like you guys do was predicting the top 3 in each division, I'm not sure that Harvard or Chicago would have been in people's top 3s. Am I wrong about that? Or am I just kind of projecting what I think based on what I was reading? Or did people actually have them in their, these are a couple of the teams that could have been in the final, Harvard and Chicago?
I would say I definitely wouldn't have put Chicago there, just because I hadn't seen much of Chicago all season. So they just weren't really on my radar. But what I had seen of Harvard this season, I was like, I would have put them up there, even if it would have been an unpopular pick. I think especially after hitting them at Orcs and seeing that like Audrey especially is truly such a double threat, I was like, they have no losing side in my opinion. Like, I just think because I didn't really see Chicago much this season, and like I wasn't super familiar with the people in their program, like perhaps that wouldn't have been a top 3 pick for me, but I think Harvard would always going to be there for me. It would have been like Harvard, Tufts, and I'd love to say us, but that's just me projecting.
And Juliana, you're going to weigh in a second. I'm giving you plenty of time to think of a great answer.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
But I want to just put one more thing out there. And again, I'd be lying if I said I watched a ton of Harvard or Chicago this year, because I didn't have the opportunity to. But I do see the results, and I do pay close attention to how, round by round things are going at the big tournaments. And I don't think Harvard had a particularly good invitational season, and they kind of just made it out of regionals and Orcs. What is the explanation for that? Do you think it was just kind of a fluke thing that they didn't do as well at those tournaments, and their strength, they really were as good as their nationals finish?
Yeah, I think for a lot of programs this season, the timing of Orcs was just really terrible. Like I remember talking to Travis about this at Orcs, about like how they had been on spring break like the week before Orcs, and their Orcs prep was like kind of crazy because of that. I mean, honestly, I know, what do you have to like predict a team's finish on besides their regionals and Orcs finishes? Like, I get that. But as a team that also doesn't typically do that well at regionals or Orcs, I'm like, after you get out, I feel like it's just a different ballgame, So I think based on like the talent of their roster alone, the nationals finish doesn't surprise me. Even if their invite season, even if regionals and Orcs were not what people are expecting of, a top 10, let alone a first in the nation team.
And I'm sure there are people, and I promise, Juliana, you're going to weigh in a second. I'm sure there are people who watching this and watching other things that other kind of back and forths I've had about this with other competitors. It probably sounds like I'm saying that Harvard and Chicago didn't deserve to be in the final. I'm not saying that at all. I think the lesson here is that NCT is really random. Like I almost think there shouldn't be like final rounds. Like there should be obviously, because it's fun, but it's just like, so it's very rare that the best team wins at any event. And so that's not to say that Chicago or Harvard were not the best team this year. Maybe it was Harvard's Orcs finish that it wasn't actually a good indicator of how good they were. I just think it's you don't really know at this stuff. What I always tell my Drexel team is you need to be good enough to get lucky, right? You need to be good enough to be in that group of 5 or 6 teams that can win. And sometimes you get the breaks and sometimes you don't. And I kind of think that's what happened, not just in NCT, but probably elsewhere, especially for Harvard. Juliana, you got to hear all the great things that me and Sarah said. What do you think?
I mean, you basically just stole what I was going to say about the randomness that I think people really don't consider when comparing between invitationals and Orcs and going into Nats. I mean, just because a team maybe didn't get out first at Orcs, it doesn't necessarily indicate to me like they're not going to do as well at nationals. I've been in so many rounds where I think we're going to sweep or like lose all the ballots, and there's a totally different outcome I wouldn't have expected. So I'm thinking about who's going to win Nats. I'm, careful not to discount that. And then even, which teams are in the top 3 versus the top 6 of a field, I think any of those teams can make it to the final round. And without having actually seen all the teams compete this year, I wasn't really sure who was going to make it to the final. I mean, clearly there were some powerhouse teams like Tufts who have been doing well every single tournament that I think people maybe expected to see in the finals, but having scrimmaged Chicago, heard so much about Harvard, and now seeing them, it doesn't really surprise me that they made it to the finals with all that talent.
All right, let me ask another question. I'm going to try to get you guys to say something controversial. Just kidding. So let's take our own opinions out of it. Let's just try to project what we think the broader community would have said. Can we agree that if you polled the average AMTA competitor, that person would have said that Tufts was the favorite at nationals? Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
I think so. It's like the vocal pick. Yeah.
Who do you think most people would have said next? And again, I'm not saying you two believe this. I'm saying you asking that the average person, who do you think they would have said next after Tufts? Because I got a lot of different answers on this show. I think most people would have said Patrick Henry, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people would have said UMBC, just knowing that Thomas and Natalie were still there and like they're just so phenomenal. I think that would have been a popular pick for sure.
Yeah. And I think both of those schools did really well. So it is still a pretty good indicator of who's good and who's not. It's just the final round. I think the lesson here is sometimes we put a little bit too much emphasis on, finishing 5th versus 2nd, or 1st in your division versus 6th in your division. I think.
And you can look, all those teams tied with the same number of ballots. So it's
right.
It's like
also, I think one thing to keep in mind, especially with Nats, is like the judging pool and the divisions pretty much determine how everything is going to go. Like, I don't know if this was your experience at Nats, but we would go into rounds, and at the end of the rounds, our judge legitimately would be like, oh yeah, so I spent my entire career defending cops. And I'm like, okay, well then you definitely viewed this case very differently on either side than if we had just been in a different courtroom with a different presider. Like, there is so much about mock trial that's random. And that's kind of what I love about it. Kind of what makes it very frustrating is like, there are so many times I come out of a round feeling confident. I'm like, I was so wrong. And I feel like Nats is the place where that happens the absolute most.
So go ahead, Juliana.
Sorry, I definitely agree. I mean, I walked out of some Nats rounds where judges made comments about what witnesses were wearing or costumes or something I wouldn't even have taken into consideration. So it's just hard to say.
I also think, and then I promise we'll put a bow on this topic for good. I also think the biggest thing is with AMTA especially, and this isn't so much the case in law school because the witnesses aren't scored, but I think it's witnesses that create such kind of random outcomes at times, because who knows what people are looking for with witnesses. For example, and maybe this is like, people would not expect this because I'm from, I'm in the AMTA community. I don't like the crazy witnesses. Like, I've told the story on the show before, but I remember being at a judge's orientation and someone asking, like, how do you score the witnesses? And someone said, like, whoever's funniest. And I was like, that is not correct, like, at all. It shouldn't, and if it is correct, it shouldn't be that way at all. And so, but then I would say the average judge probably loves that stuff, and they literally are scoring it based on who's more entertaining. I don't score it that way. I score it on who I think is the better witness, meaning they're helping their team in the way that's credible, whether they do an accent or not. So I think that probably contributes to the randomness. I'll get off my soapbox and we'll finally get into watching this opening. We're going to watch Ollie Alekri's opening from round 4 against Dickinson at nationals this year. This is his opening on defense. He was a witness on the other side. Sarah, did you see this side?
Yes, did see this in person. And it was great. It was very entertaining. It was one of those things. And I wonder if he does it in round 4 as well. So actually, maybe I'll comment on it if I see him do it, where it was just interesting choices were made that I was like, I would never even have thought to do that. But now it's kind of in the back of my mind if I ever do mock trial again.
Let's get into this.
The liar acted alone. Now the state just got up here and they told you about a drug conspiracy, the MCPD. Drugs being stolen, evidence logs being falsified, and I noticed...
What do you guys think about the theme, like calling one of the prosecution's witnesses a liar in your theme?
I think, and this might be a hot take, I think it comes off better coming from him because he has an accent. So people see it as like less inflammatory. You know what I mean? Like if I said this, people would be like, I can't believe you came out the gate that way because like I don't have like a nice British accent. I think it is like a little bit disarming coming from him specifically. Because I remember when I heard him say it being like, that came off so much smoother than I think it would come out of other people's mouths. And that's like a talent to him. But I also think like accent perception, which I think is really interesting. I remember just being a little taken aback, especially the way that we portrayed Murtaugh being like, it's actually kind of hard to call our Murtaugh a liar, I think. I think depending on who gets up there, the theme might, in retrospect, sound like it's in bad taste.
Yeah, I think he can probably, I've heard some of Ali's, speeches before. The prose he uses, I love it. I'm not sure that like an average competitor can get away with it. I think it would sound like crazy coming out of me, but I think it sounds so good. Not even just because of his accent, but he just has like this really great booming voice. There's someone in our program, John, who just loves every speech he does. But the liar thing, to me, it clearly worked for them. It can be hit or miss, totally depending on the portrayal of the witness. I mean, if the jury doesn't think that witness is a liar, then you're stuck repeating a theme again and again that is very arguable.
Well, let me put this out there. I agree with everything you guys just said. And this is, I think, one of the biggest differences between college mock trial and law school mock trial. College mock trial is not nearly as focused on, and this is going to sound like I'm being harsh. I'm not being harsh. It's just the reality. Not as focused on what real lawyers do in court. And I think law school mock trial is not nearly as good at performance as college competitors are. So I just think that's the big difference, for better or for worse. And setting aside like what the rules are, what the case law would say on this, I think there are certain trial lawyers or just lawyers in general who would say you cannot call someone a liar, particularly in your opening statement before there's been any evidence, and would have been put off by that. And it didn't polarize. They won the final round. They won every single round they were in. So obviously that people liked it and it didn't polarize at all, which I'm very surprised that it didn't polarize. I could see people loving it. It wouldn't have offended me as a trial lawyer and as a scoring judge, but I could see it offending other lawyers. So I was surprised by that choice. I'd be interested to know if they discussed the risks of coming out, and saying liar immediately. But it obviously worked.
There's actually some crucial facts we both agree on. We already know who stole those drugs. We already know who lied about it. And it's not my client, Officer Gene Riggs. It's Officer J. Myrtle. Where we disagree is whether Ms. Myrtle is a liar who acted alone. Today you'll see that all the evidence points to Ms. Myrtle, and the state knows it. They got her to confess to working alone, they arrested her alone, and they put her in jail. The case was closed. My client wasn't even a suspect. So what are we even doing here? Well, you'll learn that Ms. Myrtle, the convicted felon, wasn't too happy with her situation. So she changed her story to make a deal. She came up to the state over here and said, you know what? It was really all her.
I love that line. I don't know what it is about it, but he's just like, so he came over to the state over here and said, you know what? Like, I just thought it was so fun.
Yeah, no, it's watching it in person and especially like watching him walk over to us. I was like, dang, this does hit. There's something that's it's not conversational, but almost kind of conversational about this part of the opening that I think is just super effective, where I'm like, yeah, logically, this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it was just fantastic.
Members of the jury, you'll see that their case is based on a liar who acted alone. And that's a problem for the state, because when they accused my client, they assumed a heavy burden, the highest burden in our legal system, a burden to convince all of you that Officer Riggs was part of a drug conspiracy, not until it's possible or probable or likely or more than likely, no, they.
All right, trivia. Where did he get that from?
Honestly,
I'm not sure.
I'm not
really?
certain. No, I'm
It's
not
original, but what's the from?
You know, when he does the, they have, possibly, and then he like crosses down and gives higher and higher, and then he does. Let's watch the last couple seconds.
Have to lift the weight of fact.
Lift the weight of fact.
Beyond a reasonable doubt. To meet that heavy burden, the state's going to have to do a whole lot more.
So where did he get that from? That possible, and then like the bending the knees
Yes.
down and going to the ground and doing that. Do you remember? Have you guys seen that before?
No, I was just thinking that I loved it. But
I
I
haven't
like
seen
it. I like it too.
Yeah.
What I was going to say before we started watching the video was I wonder if he did it in round 4, because in round 2, he like almost fell when he crouched. And I was like, I wonder if after that he was like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm glad to see that he still did it. I think it's super effective. Not sure where it's from though.
He did it in the final also, I think. So there's an Ian Lampert example opening that Ian has like on his YouTube page. And he does that. Like he does the cops thing. So when I saw it, I was like, it's just whatever people's opinions are on it. It's just crazy that these competitors like Ben Wallace and Rule Hurry and Ian, whose videos are like, they're posting videos and like 10 years later, like competitors are like watching their videos and using bits and pieces of it for their competitions. It's just such a, it's really cool, honestly. Maybe that makes me a nerd, but I think it's fun.
And rely on the word of a convicted liar, a liar who acted alone. To show you why they'll fail, we'll call 3 witnesses. First, we're going to call Dr. Jordan Joshua to that stand. She's a forensic investigator who reviewed all the state's evidence, the drug seizures, the drug logs, and Officer J. Myrtle. And as for my client, we'll see there's simply not enough to make a connection. Next you'll hear from Ali Getz, a nightclub owner who's known Ms. Myrtle and Officer Riggs for years. He'll tell you they couldn't be more different. You'll hear he saw Ms. Myrtle alone, straight up selling drugs. But you'll hear my client never did anything of the sort. Finally, you'll hear from Officer Riggs herself. She'll tell you about her experience on the force. And you'll see she wasn't part of Ms. Myrtle's.
So when I first heard this opening, my first reaction was it's really, really good. He's fantastic. When I watched it a second or third time, I kind of felt like he doesn't really say much about the case. There's not really much discussion of, well, there was this like they were skimming drugs and there was a lab tech involved, and then there was this log, and let's talk about their evidence. They have this chart and this chart doesn't prove anything, and they have this other thing, and it's really not, there's no like interacting like with the actual facts. And generally I think that's obviously not, you want to interact with the facts, but I wonder in this case, because it was so complicated, if an opening that really didn't engage with the specificities and the intricacies of this fact pattern was more effective. Did you guys notice that?
So much. I think like pretty much in every round, facts that on a first read of the case that you thought were going to be very important literally didn't matter. Like there were rounds at the end of it where I'm like, I'm not sure that any of the judges know who Casey Bartholomew is or care. Like the death of this lab tech is so unimportant seeming when the fact pattern just has so much going on. I think people neglected it altogether. So definitely not surprising to see in this opening, like you described, a little bit of a lack of interaction with some of the facts, just because on D, it's like, you're picking and choosing so much what's actually relevant that what you may get into might be giving away your case theory or might not be relevant by the end of the trial. That I think it was just kind of I don't want to say a fault of, but just based on how this case was written and the fact that it was like a little wild.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a co-author on the case, and I have to think for like 45 seconds before I remember who Casey Bartholomew is.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, I opened for this case, and I like the biggest struggle was figuring out what are we going to highlight in this? What are we going to try to make as simple as possible? And ultimately, I think the most effective opens are the ones that name the least number of people possible, don't mention facts that are unnecessary. Like, I don't think we mentioned Casey's death in the open at all, and rarely throughout the entire case. And if you do that, then it's much easier to follow the thread. So I think what he's doing is definitely effective. It's way too confusing otherwise.
What were your guys' D themes?
Oh God, I wasn't on defense. I'll look it up quickly.
Oh my gosh, I was D closer and I literally can't remember. Our D theme was.
Everyone who's watching really wants to know now.
This is so embarrassing for me. I'm actually gonna have to look it up.
I did look hers up. She spoke up, so they're taking her down. We had kind of like a whistleblower theory going on. So
I like it.
Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. When he couldn't find a conspiracy, he created one. We had a theory that was basically like Agent Travis made all of this up. So that was our D theme.
Nice. I like both of those.
I can't even say it, members of the jury. She wasn't part of Ms. Myrtle's scheme to steal and skim. She was just a rookie ball, trying to do her job. While she was taking down drug dealers, it was Ms. Myrtle alone who was taking those drugs for herself and selling them off. But you might ask yourselves the question, well, she must have known at some point, right? Well, she did. And when she did, you'll hear Officer Riggs confront Ms. Myrtle. And to keep her quiet, you'll hear Ms. Myrtle threaten her kids. But today, with a woman who threatened her family in chains, Officer Riggs is choosing to come before you and testify. Members of the jury, the state has chosen to take a mother who feared for the lives of her children and call her a thief, a criminal, a crook. We ask you not to make the same mistake. Use your common sense, your good judgment. Throughout today's trial, really look at the facts and pay attention to Ms. Myrtle's testimony. And you'll see that she is a liar who acted alone.
I really like that they really focused hard on, like, it's all going to come down to this one witness for the prosecution and really focus on them. I thought that was an interesting choice. Again, I think aside from the fact that Ali's just really good, I think this opening simplifies their theory. As I don't know that he could have simplified it any more than he did. And I like that he's based. I mean, it's pretty obvious. The guy who's saying it was my guy is a liar. He needed a better deal. When he testifies, pay attention because he's going to show that he's a liar. And that's the whole theory. He's a liar who acted alone. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really effective. Is this much different than what most teams were doing with their D theories and their D opening specifically, or was it kind of what you saw all weekend?
I think definitely the most effective presentation of this kind of obviously Murtaugh's line theory and theme that I saw at Nats at least. But I think it was a little bit par for the course that people were like, why would you trust Murtaugh? Like, there is absolutely no good reason to trust this person. I think for us on D, we were like, what if there's a Murtaugh that's just the most sympathetic, like, Murtaugh in the world? And I think those are the most effective Murtaughs, which made it a little bit difficult to do, I think, at times. But I think, from this opening alone, I think the judge, the jury is definitely primed to really laser focus on all the inconsistencies in Murtaugh's story. And I think that's what made their P case overall, their D case rather, overall very effective.
Right. I mean, this case is ultimately just he said, she said, who you're going to believe in the end. So this is in line with basically everything I saw. I mean, their theory is interesting because what happens if you don't call Murtaugh or Riggs or whatever side you're on? They're really basing it off of the testimony itself. So I wonder, how they adapted in that situation. But yeah, at the end of the day, the case is just Murtaugh v. Riggs. So
that's why at the end of the trial, my co-counsel, Mr. C, will come before you and ask you to find Officer Riggs not guilty. Thank you.
When I saw that opening, not this one, but in the final round, live on YouTube, obviously, I was blown away. Like, setting the substance aside, I just think he is really good. And particularly as an opener, really good opener. Just credible and believable. And Sarah, to your point, the accent certainly helps with that. But I think he's going to be a tough out at combat. What do you guys think?
I definitely agree. I think especially in an opening, I think on D, P kind of gets up there and is like frantically pointing fingers, and he gets up there and is so calm, cool, and collected. And it'll be interesting to see what he's like with less prep time. But I think it is so difficult to maintain that kind of cool demeanor. I think it, like you said, it makes you look so credible. I would not like to hit him with trial by combat if I can avoid it, because I think it is probably the antithesis of my style. But I think it's super effective, and I think that opening shows it.
That's the issue. He's a style clash for basically anyone he plays.
Yep.
So even if you think you're better, it's the judges may like him better. And he's so good at what he does that I think he's going to be a tough out. Even especially as a witness too. I would imagine he's a very good witness. I've never seen him witness, but I would imagine he's very good. Have you guys seen him witness at all?
I have not. I imagine he's very authentic. He's so conversational and unique in his style in opening. So I can imagine that carries over to witnessing too.
Yeah, I've never seen him personally, but I've heard that he's, just like you said, kind of carries that demeanor throughout. And as a witness, I think that's very unique.
Who do you think is the best witness in the field? Is it Travis? I think that's what most people would guess that you'd say, but I'm curious if you have a different opinion.
I would probably say Travis. Like his portrayal in the final round, my jaw hit the floor. Like I was, especially because when we saw them in the scrimmage, Travis was actually an attorney because Stella had lost her voice. So when I saw him, get up there and I think give one of the most authentic portrayals I've seen in mock trial in a long time, that like used an accent effectively in a way that added to the character story rather than just like, here's a fun accent that I'm doing. He really shocked me because I've only ever really seen Travis attorneys. So I would say Travis probably.
You agree, Juliana? Or someone else you're thinking?
Yeah, I would say Travis too. I mean, I think it probably depends also on what type of witness is going to be at combat. If it's going to be sympathetic or an expert witness, Rhea, clearly, she's amazing at experting. So maybe she's best in that category. But Travis's Courtney Rudd was so good. Everyone's talking about it. It's so genuine. It's like taking a story that's not obviously, one that's going to be sympathetic and a crier and doing it so well. So yeah, he might be the pick.
So prediction time. You guys have seen me do this in the show hopefully before, but if you haven't, the rules are as follows. You must pick one name and one name only, and you can't pick each other. And I'm also going to add one additional wrinkle. It was really nice that Thomas picked you, Sarah. So I'm not going to allow you to pick him back as like a return the favor kind of thing.
Okay.
So with those ground rules, Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I would say Rhea. We didn't hit Emery once this season, but last season we did. And every time she was just a menace to be around with because she's so good. And I can imagine that something like trial by combat is so well suited to her style and just, everything that she's good at in mock trial from what I've seen. So I would say her.
You're the first person to pick Rhea on the show. I'm really
That's
surprised by it.
shocking to me.
I'm
honestly.
shocked too. I would have guessed more people would be picking Rhea.
Yeah.
I think she is, and I said this to her when she was on recently, like that she is very much authentically herself and round. And I think like it's really hard for college competitors to do that well. And she does it better than almost anyone. And she's a really good witness too.
Mm-hmm.
So she's really smart. Like she can synthesize the material quickly. I would guess based on much my interactions with her. I'm very surprised that you're the first person to pick her, but I obviously think that's a good pick. Juliana, what do you think?
I'm going to go with Travis too, because he's just a double threat. I mean, I'm pretty sure people have named him already, but he's clearly such a good attorney, such a good witness, and he's done TBC before. So he's coming in with that experience already.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is just a really good field. And I think there's probably, I don't know. I mean, obviously I think Bennett, people would say Bennett's the clear favorite because just given his performance last year and how Tufts did this year. But I think beyond that, it's pretty wide open. And there's a lot of really, really good competitors, you two included, obviously. So I'm really excited to see what happens. It's going to be crazy. I have really no prediction because I just think everyone is so good. And this year I've been in the unique position where, you know, with the show and then just with the Zoom mock trial, I've gotten to see a lot more of the competitors go. So I actually have an educated opinion on some of these people beyond just like seeing videos they send in of themselves with their applications and that sort of thing. I'm just really impressed with this year's crop. I think it's going to be a really good competition. Before I let you guys go, I want to hear about what you're doing this summer. What are your plans aside from coming out to LA in a couple weeks?
This summer I am hardcore studying for the LSAT. That is pretty much all I'm doing this summer. I honestly, with like mock trial in school and everything, haven't had the time. And now I'm like, this is probably the last 3 months of my life where I will have like legitimately nothing to do. I'm just going to grind out studying for the LSAT and take it at the end of the summer. Not super exciting, but that's what I'll be doing.
So you're going to apply for the fall of 23?
No, I'm going to be applying for the fall of 24. I just kind of want to get out the way.
Got it. What are you doing for the next 2 years?
That's an excellent question. No, legitimately, currently don't have a job. So this is not like a shameless plug, someone hire me, but but yeah, basically, you know, the last couple of years I've been doing kind of like legal aid public interest work. And I'm kind of looking to do that again. So this summer, beyond LSAT setting, we'll be applying to kind of like the public interest law sphere kind of work, just to see like, okay, is this something I actually want to do after law school or not?
Do you know where you want to go to school?
No, not yet. That's very much up in the air. Part of me is like, I think I just need to get out of the Northeast. I'm from New York. I go to school in Connecticut. I'd actually like to go to school somewhere warm. So perhaps the West Coast.
Los Angeles?
Perhaps Los Angeles, you know, if they'll have me.
I think they'll have you.
But yeah, nowhere is like the dream school at the moment. Kind of taking some time to figure that out as well. But maybe looking forward to some warmer weather than I've been experiencing in the Northeast.
Nice. Juliana, what are you doing this summer?
I'm also studying for the LSAT right now, actually. My laptop's currently on top of my LSAT prep book on my desk, funny enough. But in July, I'm starting a job, so taking a gap year before that. So then, yeah, I'll move to DC. My job's in health policy, majored in public policy at Duke. So it'll be kind of nice to take a break from school in the meantime.
So you're going to be fall of 23 then?
Hopefully, yeah.
Do you know where you want to go?
I don't know. Like, I think law school is such a numbers game that I think once I have taken the LSAT, I'll be able to predict better. But basically, like, the best school that will have me is my easy answer.
Any chance it's going to be a double Duke?
I would love that. I mean, Duke's an amazing school. I think it would feel a little weird because that's where all our mock trial practices are. So it's like I've just spent 4 years going to the Duke Law School building. So it'd be funny to spend another 3, but Duke's amazing. So.
Well, I'm really excited to see you guys in just a few weeks. And I've gotten to see both of your teams compete over Zoom over the last year or so. And both of your teams are incredible. You guys are incredible. And it would not surprise me to see you guys in those playoff rounds after our 4 prelims in LA in a few weeks. So I'm really excited. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much.